Hey folks, it's Rob Flux with another Sunday session. And today we're going to be talking to you about how do you assess your strengths and weaknesses, and more specifically, what are the critical things that you can do about those in order to get yourself deal ready. Now, this is a absolutely major topic, and the reason for it is because the property development process is so broad and so large, and there are so many different key steps in the process. And if you don't go and assess all of your areas, then you don't know what it is that you need to work on in order to get there. You see, a number of us think that all we need to do is know a little bit about our deal strategy, and then off we go and we can do a deal almost anywhere. That's because real estate agents tell us that every deal is profitable. And I guess there's deals everywhere, allegedly, despite the market going up and down and crazy things happening and all sorts of things. So how do you how do you get into a deal, and make sure that you're actually deal ready without going off a little bit undercooked? Now, as I said, there are so many different areas in there. I'm going to do something a little bit unusual today. I'm actually going to do a small little presentation. Now, I typically don't do this, but because there are so many different areas, I thought I would actually show you. There's actually 26 key areas that I've assessed where you need to actually understand where your strengths and weaknesses actually are, all the way from learning the lingo, because they use different terminology in different states. For example, a building approval in one state is a construction certificate in another. And so when you're starting to talk about things, it's actually just understanding what people are talking about when they're coming from different jurisdictions and the like, so that you know what's going on. Mindset and belief that everything's possible, actually understanding the property development process, choosing your development strategy, assessing your strengths and weaknesses, learning your development strategy, selecting a single council, locating hotspots, current market conditions, becoming an expert, etc., etc. There are so many of these. As a matter of fact, because there are so many of these, it was relatively recently that we went out to our community to actually understand where it is that you guys are actually struggling in this process. And we asked a survey of our 16,500 people in our community, and they came back with a ranking pretty much of all of the key issues and challenges, and the number of questions that we actually started to collate. We had, close to 400 odd responses in the end. And what we came out with was this, the ones that are highlighted in bold. So mindset and belief that it is actually possible. The property development process itself, choosing your development strategy, learning that specific development strategy, locating where that it will actually work, understanding current market conditions, how to build your team, how to do deal finding, how to do your site analysis for both the development potential and also the profit potential, i.e. doing feasibilities, how to fund the deal, how to do deals when you've got no cash, with no and low money down strategies, and then actually the building and construction process. They were the key ones that you guys told us were the ones that were actually holding you back, and where you were started to understand your strengths and weaknesses and went, well, this is where we are truly weak. So we've done a whole bunch of things in and around those specific areas with Property Pulse stories, with email blogs, with Facebook Lives, and a whole bunch more, with everything trying to address those key elements. But today, what I'm going to do is give you some insights into how you can actually start to break those down in a little bit more detail, so that you can start to help yourself in that journey. You see, what tends to happen is there are so many issues and challenges that you've got that we tend to get overwhelmed. And the reason for it is because the number of permutations that can actually happen. Well, if I don't know my development strategy, then I don't know what area I go in. If I don't know what area I'm going to go in, how do I know how to start to fill the funnel? And if I don't know how to fill the funnel, how am I going to get a deal? And so there's all these different elements, and they're all intertwined. So what I wanted to do was actually show you, a small little way that most of you are actually dealing with the problem, and that is causing a whole bunch of pain for you. So let's have a look at the way most of you are actually starting to deal with this, and then how you can actually start to simplify it. So if you are trying to go from point A to point B, then typically you're going to have a couple of issues and challenges you have along the way. You don't always just go in a straight line. Typically, you're going to have to solve a few problems along the way, and each problem has its own permutations. So when we start to look at this, and if I just use a couple of examples, if I don't know what my development strategy is, well, I might have townhouses that I might consider. I might have subdivisions I might consider. I might have apartment complexes that I might start to consider. Within each of those three, there might be, well, which council will that actually start to work in? Because not every council is going to work for my townhouses, and not every council is going to work for my subdivisions, and not every council is going to work for my apartment complexes, because there's different growth opportunities in there. Some areas have got urban sprawl, some areas have got upward developments, etc. Now, within those, which suburbs are going to work? And then as we start to see, when we start to break this down and go further and further into the problem, what most of us are doing is we're looking all the way out here and we're seeing the overwhelm with regards to the number of decisions that are actually getting there. It's causing a whole bunch of analysis paralysis, which means that we get overwhelmed very, very easily. We don't know where to start. We don't even know what questions to start asking. And so what I want to do is just give you some insights into how to simplify the process. Now, you've heard the rhetoric before. How do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So what we want to do is actually start to show you how you can actually start to break this down so that it actually helps you out. Instead of looking at all the issues and challenges all the way out here, what I want you to do is just look at this one problem right here. Now, if you do that, if you just look at your strategy, what development strategy am I going to choose? And you choose a single one, what happens is it starts to eliminate all of the noise that sits around it, which then means that your life is much, much simpler and you don't have as much challenges actually seeing ahead of you. So then move to the next problem. Well, which particular council is this particular strategy going to start to work in? And when you start to do that, you make a selection there and it eliminates some noise and off you go here. And then within that council, which suburb is actually going to work? And that again starts to eliminate some noise. And until eventually we map out our entire path all the way through to the end. Now, the problem is that most of us don't tend to do that. What we tend to do is try to solve individual problems along the way. Somebody has already, an agent brings us a deal, and so we have not chosen the area, we've not chosen the strategy, and we try to force that into our process and go, well, why is all that all start to happen? And because our strengths and weaknesses, we don't even know if that's the strategy we want to do. We don't know if it's the area we want to do it. All these sorts of things then start to create a whole bunch of overwhelm, which then starts to, I guess, really buckle us down. So what I want to do is give you some insights. Now, if I start to think about this a little bit more simplistically, we want to start with the end in mind. We want to chunk it all the way down into those very simple steps so we can just deal with one problem that's sitting right in front of us right here, right now. Now, when we look at all of the issues and challenges, I just showed you 26 of them. Now, you should do your own assessment to see where your strengths and weaknesses are. But when you start to do that, what you want to do is start to order them in regards to, well, I don't need to worry about, for example, the building and construction process if I don't even have a deal. Okay, so if I don't know how to get a deal, why would I worry about building and construction? A lot of us are worried about, well, what's the cost to construct? Well, haven't got a deal, so that's not really relevant right now. What about funding? Well, again, if I don't have a deal, maybe I don't even know where I should be farming for a deal. So I don't want to worry about funding just yet. So if I don't know where I should be farming, then that in itself is an issue. What should I be farming for? I don't know what rules that sit around it. So we want to work backwards, walk backwards. And as we start to walk all the way backwards, what you'll find is most of us haven't actually chosen our strategy, and yet we're going out and getting educated out the wazoo, and we're going to pay for all these really expensive courses, but we don't know if that particular course is going to teach us the strategy that we want to know, because all of us have issues and challenges with regards to, maybe some people want to do townhouses, maybe you want to do some subdivisions, maybe somebody wants to do rooming accommodation, maybe some want to do commercial. Everything works, folks, but it doesn't work everywhere. And so if you aren't aligned to that particular strategy, you don't know which educator is the right one for you. So you want to start with, well, decision number one. What development strategy do I want to go with? And if you do that, then you can start to go, okay, well, then which educators actually teach that? Then you can go, well, which educators are the ones that have got a good reputation and which ones can actually move forward? Then you can start to step up and go, well, now that I have chosen that particular development strategy, what can I do to move forward? So we're going to break all of these down. And if I go back and look at the list, this is a very rough order of those 12 highest biggest challenges that you guys have actually given me. So firstly, believing it's possible is a really good place to start. Then choosing your development strategy, learning all about that particular development strategy till we dive further and further and further down and try to put it in a particular order where if we can solve that one problem first, it means it's going to take away a lot of the noise of the future problems. So that said, why don't we actually start to have a look at, well, what are some of the things that we can actually do to try and pick up on some of those skills? So firstly, from a believing that it is actually possible. Well, there's deals happening everywhere, folks. And so it's really about looking at evidence of other people getting success for you. And I guess seeing that, well, if they can do it and they've got a very similar circumstance to me, then that is the belief that I can actually do that. So in order to do that, you should be attending meetups. We run meetups all the way around the country, and most weekends we're actually running an event. No matter where you are, you can dial into those from around the country through live streaming, or physically turn up if you're in Brisbane, Sydney, or Melbourne. We run those events anywhere. And if you want to do that, I should actually put the link up for that. Come to our events page and you're going to see how to come to some of those events for yourself. On top of that, you could potentially become an annual member of our community. And if you become an annual member, you've got access to all of the recordings for all of the meetups ever. So you can actually start to watch real deals of the kind of strategy that you might be interested in. Maybe that will actually help you to actually understand whether or not you want to do a particular strategy. We've got more than 10 years worth of content in there, some of it recordings, some of it PowerPoint presentations, but pretty much every single meeting we've ever done since we joined all the way. So since we started all the way back in 2012. Okay, you should also find a buddy who is actually doing what it is that you want to be doing. So that buddy might have already done a couple of deals. They might have already started the process of doing that, but you can arm in arm start to, believe that you can actually start to do this. And if that buddy is actually getting success themselves, then they're going to be able to give you the encouragement along the way. You might want to also get yourself a coach from your mindset perspective. Now, a coach is very much about mindset, and it is not about skills, okay? A mentor is for skills. The mentor is how do I? A coach is about the belief in the fact that you can actually do it. A coach is the one who activates you so that you will actually take the action that you need to do. And then a mentor is the person who will make sure that it is the right action. So a coach is going to help you to identify what your limiting beliefs are, for example. They're going to help you to understand what your fears and phobias are. They're going to help you to understand whether or not you're not taking decisions because of analysis paralysis, procrastination, or any other reason. You might have a fear of failure or a fear of success, those sorts of things. So get yourself a coach. A coach is going to actually help you. Now, there are many, many coaches out in the real world who have nothing to do with property. That in itself is okay, because a coach is about mindset. So long as they actually understand the fundamentals, they don't need to actually understand the skills. Or you could come join a program like ours where we have both coaches and mentors in the process, and that might help you because they can give you the support that you need within the context that you actually need it, for example. Okay. Then the next decision you want to make is choosing your development strategy. Now, folks, there are hundreds of different development strategies out there, and in all honesty, they all make money, okay? But they only make money if you get really, really good at it. But fundamentally, when you actually break down all the different strategies, there's only really two types of development strategies that will actually scale, okay? Now, scale is something where you can actually start small, learn the process on a much more simple deal, and then start to step up a deal size. Okay. So you might start with a 1 into 2 of something, then turn that into a 1 of 4 of something, then a 1 into 6 of something, etc., until you actually grow. So if we start to look at what are those ones that scale, then the ones that scale are subdivisions and multi-res. Now, multi-res typically takes 2 forms. That's townhouses and apartments. So technically it's 2, but it could be 2A and a 2B, for example. But let's start to have a look. You could do a 1 into 2 subdivision. You could do a 1 into 4 subdivision, do a 1 into 6, 1 into 10. You could build roads. You could build a suburb. You can build an entire city through the land subdivision process. As a matter of fact, if we go back 250 odd years, Australia was a 1-lot land subdivision. So everything that we've actually ever done is because we've been subdividing as we go. So know that subdivision is something that can scale. Okay. The other things that can scale are townhouses. So you might start with a duplex. You might then go to a quadplex, then a 6-pack, and beyond, and you're going to start to scale out. Or you could do apartment complexes where you might do units at grade. You might do units that are 2 or 3 stories tall. Then you might do units with some basements, and then you're going to go 5 stories, 10 stories, 20 stories, and beyond. Now, so one goes scale out, the other one's scale up. So when you start to look at those, there's a few different elements that you want to start to think about to say, well, how am I actually going to determine where I actually move forward? Now, my guidance to you is because I guess it can get quite complex, and each one of those development strategies has its own sets of rules and criteria and that sort of thing. It can get kind of tricky. So my guidance is one council. My guidance is one strategy, I should say, then one council, and then 3 suburbs. That way, you don't become jack of all trades and master of none. Instead, what we want you to do is we want you to narrow down your focus and get super deep in the detail. Now, let's have a look at what some of that detail might start to look like. Why would you pick one development strategy? Okay. Some of the biggest mistakes that I actually see property developers make is they just pick the wrong strategy. They don't know the constraints that sit there, and they get halfway down a path and they go, oh, I'm not sure. And they flip and they flop and they don't know where they're going. They get bright, shiny objectitis and they flip around quite a lot. They're not picking the single strategy to actually focus on. And so because of that, they take a whole bunch of effort to learn a whole bunch of skills, and then just before they get success, they flip over to something else. Okay. So we don't want you to do that. Okay. Don't want you to change strategies partway through. We want you to take the time and actually get that strategy process right. We don't want you to get distracted by bright, shiny objects, because other people will be getting success. As I touched on, every strategy works, folks. So you're going to see other people getting success, and bright, shiny objects is going to try to distract you. But if you've chosen your path, stick to your path, trust the process, and you will actually get through. Okay. A lot of people look at too many deals, and more specifically, they look in too many places. So they're looking in multiple councils and multiple suburbs where they've got no experience or no knowledge as to what's actually going ahead. And as a result of that, they tend to get overwhelmed and confused by everything, which makes it really, really tricky. And that causes a lot of the analysis paralysis that I touched on in step 1, which is the mindset side of things, because again, there's so much going on. So we want to chunk it down. Most people are looking at lots of things, and because they're only looking at lots of things, they can't look at very much. We want to spin it on its head, look at one thing, get very, very deep. Same amount of effort makes it much, much simpler to actually get there. Now, how do you choose your strategy? Well, this is going to be unique for everyone, but you want to start to actually understand what are your goals and objectives that you're actually trying to achieve from this process. You want to take an assessment of what is my starting position? So how much money do I have? Have I got deposit to purchase something? Have I got liquid cash to run a deal? Have I got serviceability to run it? We want to start to understand that, because that might limit the deals that you can get into without being very creative in your acquisition model or getting money partners into the process. You want to understand what is your risk profile, because your risk profile is going to determine whether or not you want to take on really big debts. Okay, if you don't want to take on really big debts, then you probably don't want to take on really big projects. So that's going to help you to narrow down what your development strategy is. What access do you have to cash? Okay, so liquid cash is what you need to actually run the deal. Now, it doesn't have to be your cash, but it could be someone else's cash. If you don't have access to it, then that might limit the size of the deal that you get into. So that might change which particular approach you want. What sort of timelines do you actually have? Because if you don't have the time to run the deal, and if you can't wait until payday, till the very end of the process, then you don't want a project that takes 2 years or 3 years. You want something that takes 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, etc. So that might change what you do. How much physical time you can actually put into the process. You might be super busy at work doing 60 or 70-hour weeks, so you don't have time to do super detailed and super complex development strategies. Instead, you want something that's nice and simple, for example. How long you can wait for a payday. By the time you choose your strategy, learn where it works, start to farm it, get yourself a deal, then get into the deal, then actually run the project, you could be 2, 3, sometimes 4 years into the process before your first payday. If you choose something like a multi-res approach, typically somewhere about 2.5 to 3 years before the first payday, versus if you go down a subdivision path, that might be in as little as 12 to 18 months, for example. So your payday might be much, much faster, but it's probably going to be much, much smaller as well. How much are you willing to invest? You might actually have the cash, but you might not be willing to invest because your risk profile doesn't actually have the appetite for that. So that can actually change people as well. So start to ask yourself those sorts of questions. They're going to give you insights into whether or not you should be doing one of those two approaches that I actually touched on. So subdivisions or multi-res, okay? The next thing you want to do is when you start to do this, you want to start to understand why you don't want to change strategies, okay? Because if you change strategies halfway through, you're going to waste your time and start again. You put all this effort in and then you have to go back to the beginning. You don't want to learn a brand new strategy every single time. What you want to do is learn something small, get the lessons out of the process and say, well, how do I do a very slightly bigger version of that so I can reapply all the lessons that I've just learned and then just add that much extra skill into the process. Or sometimes it's not even adding a lot of skill. It's just adding a few more zeros because I'm doing a slightly bigger deal. When you start to do that, you're going to start to become very efficient and very effective at the process, okay? And each deal will build skills from the previous deal so that then you can actually start to accelerate at the tail end, okay? So you should aim to be inch wide and mile deep. And if you can, you're going to be super mega productive in actually doing that. When you've done that, then my guidance is that you want to then start to build a 5-year property action plan that starts to map out based on your strategy. What is the deal trajectory that I want to do? So how do I start small and step up and then step up and then step up in order to get to the deal size that I want in order to get me towards that financial freedom goal, okay? So in order to do that, that's going to understand. Firstly, you've already chosen your development strategy. So based on that, you want to understand, well, for deal number 1, what is that deal size? For deal number 2, what is that deal size? Is it the same one? Are you going to step up? Do you think that you're going to be ready to step up? What is the deal timing? So do I want to get into deal number 1 at the 12-month mark and deal number 2 at the 18-month mark and that sort of thing? Because you might not have the time resources. You want to start to map that out, okay? You're going to start to understand your exit strategy. Are you going to sell everything? Or are you going to keep something in that process? You should know that up front. Your 5-year property action plan is going to map that out for you to actually help you to understand. And what it's going to do is it's going to help you to actually understand the number of deals that you need in order to reach your financial freedom goals, okay? Now, I'm not going to go into that. I've covered that in other presentations as to how to actually get there. But know that by mapping out that journey, it gives you a very deliberate path. So when you get out of one deal, you know exactly what to get into for the very next deal, okay? So what you want to do is actually start to understand how many properties will actually take you to get to financial freedom. That's then going to, and you want to make sure that that is scalable in order to do that, okay? Always start with the end in mind. How many properties do I need at the tail end of this? And then start to work backwards and say, well, if I need to do that, what is a smaller version of that kind of deal where I can actually keep a property? And what is a smaller version of that deal? And what is a smaller version of that deal? Work backwards until you go, well, what does deal number 1 start to look like? Okay. Now, then as you start, so you want to plan starting at the end and moving backwards, and then you want to execute starting from the start and moving forwards. So based on that, you want to understand as you start to go into each deal, should this be a chunk deal where I'm actually getting lots of cash to roll over to go into the next deal, or am I going to start to keep assets and actually turn these into cash flow? Okay, so each time you go into a new project, you're going to start to understand that. You want to understand the deal complexity. So is it a small, medium, large, extra large kind of deal, that sort of thing, and what sort of skills you need to do so that as you're moving forward, you're going to say, well, do I know how to do a 1 into 2? Not yet. Okay, I need to learn the skills on how to do that. Do I know how to do a 1 into 4? Well, I know how to do a 1 into 2, but what is the slightly bigger problem that I need to do? When I start to get to 1 into 6s, 1 into 10s, I might be starting to build roads, detention basins, bioretention basins, all sorts of things like that. Or I might be building basements, fire sprinkler systems, all sorts of things. So as we start to get our deal complexity happening, we're going to have to pick up more skills and more skills, but building on the skills that we already had in the previous process, okay? Then we're going to start to shadow other people. We're going to joint venture with people. We're going to find which educators are actually teaching those particular things, and know that if anyone is looking for education, we clearly run a program called the Property Development Formula. And in that, we teach pretty much the subdivision and townhouse and apartment processes. So if anyone is actually interested in that, I'll leave the link on the page below, but not going to go into a sales pitch at this point. Just know that that is there, and you can actually go and look at that as you go. The next thing you want to do is then start to understand, well, what is the property development process? Now, the property development process is going to be slightly different for each one of those strategies. So for example, if I'm doing land subdivisions, then I need to actually understand how do I do road networks and who are the referral agencies that I might need to deal with from that, all that sort of thing. If I'm starting to do apartments and townhouses, then I'm going to have completely different issues and challenges because I'm building the finished product for the person at the end. So I need to understand, well, what are the demographics of the area, that sort of thing. Now, how we start to learn all of this, okay, we start at the very, 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 very beginning. State government legislation and state government strategic planning, they start telling you where people are actually being pushed, okay? If you understand where people are actually being pushed, then you can actually start to understand, well, based on where they're being pushed, it's going to determine the kind of product that actually fits in that particular area based on demographics and things like that, okay? Now, some state governments then take that a little bit more localized, and they have what they call a district plan. So the district plan is then going to give you some more specific outcomes of what they're trying to do by amalgamating the outcomes of 4 or 5 councils together, for example. So they've got a regional plan or a district plan in order to do that. Then the local government, knowing that they're going to receive a whole bunch of people, the local government then have strategic plans to say, well, how and where are we going to start to put these people? Because we know they're coming, but we don't know where they're going to fit because we don't have enough parks, we don't have enough libraries, we don't have enough sewer, stormwater, all those sorts of things sitting in there. So they've got to work out how do they actually strategically plan to accept all of these people. And then based on that, then they build what is called the local government city plan. Okay, so if you start with the top and work all the way down, you'll get a very, very good view about where people are going, the kind of product they're expecting, and the rules that are actually going to sit there that will make that plan actually come into fruition. Now, remember, there are 537 different councils, so there's 537 different ways of doing the exact same thing. So that's why I want you to just choose one of those councils. Now, that property development process will be unique to that particular council and that particular strategy. So it's really important that you start to narrow that down. The next thing you want to do is locate your hotspots. Well, based on where the people were moving to, based on your deal size and based on your deal trajectory, deal strategy, I should say, that's going to start to determine where your strategy starts to work. So there are lots of things where this works. So there's lots of opportunities that actually sit out there, but we want to go, well, where's there a council where there's lots of opportunities that is exactly what you're trying to build? Okay, the exact deal type, the exact deal size. Where are there lots of opportunities where that actually happens? Then you want to understand where is the evidence that other people have actually done what it is that we want to do. We don't want to be the first person to actually be doing things. Instead, we want to actually say, well, I want people to have done it before me, and I want to measure whether or not and find proof that they've done it and find proof that they were actually profitable in the process. Now, how do I do that? Well, we start to assess, well, what would the raw site sell for? That is knowing the exact zoning, knowing the exact sizing, what would that actually sell for? Then we go look for the proof point that the finished product was actually created, and we go, what did the finished product sell for? And then what we're looking for is a thing called the arbitrage, which is the difference between them. Is the difference between the raw site and the finished product, is the difference there enough that we would actually make profit? And it's amazing how many times the answer is no. And so quite often I see in our community that people do it completely backwards. They choose the area, then they try to force the strategy on top, and there's not enough opportunities, so they wonder why they can never find anything. And when they find an opportunity, it's not profitable and they don't understand why. It's because they did it all backwards. Choose the what, that will determine the where, okay? Super, super important in order to do that. Now, remember, when you start to do that, you then want to start to say, well, in that particular area, now that I know where it is, I want to start to understand what are the current market conditions in that particular area. Is that particular market moving up? Is that particular market moving down? Remember, there are markets within markets, folks. And so quite often what we see on the news or reported by the property, I'm trying to think what their names are, but the property commentators, that's the word I was looking for. Quite often we'll see that they're talking about big, broad areas. So they'll say all of Sydney is growing, or they'll say all of Melbourne is growing, or the entire state is doing something. Whereas what we want to do is we want to start to chunk it all the way down and go, well, I'm just looking at this one council and I'm looking at these couple of suburbs. So how do we actually start to do that? So we want to chunk it down, chunk it down, chunk it down, and we want to start to understand the difference between an indicator and a driver. So an indicator is measuring what has actually happened, and a driver is, well, what is causing the market to move? Now, if you're measuring an indicator, because it's already happened, it's a lag. So we're a little bit behind what's actually happened. So sometimes people make a decision to sell, then they have to get the property ready, then they have to find an agent, then they have to put it on the market and do the marketing, then somebody has to do all the home opens, then somebody has to buy it, then it has to settle, and then the sales results that you're seeing are an indication of a decision point that was made 4 or 5 months ago. So indicators are really bad. You typically have missed the action. Instead, we want to look at property drivers. Now, driver is what are the things that are actually moving the dial? What are the things that are moving the market forward? Okay. Now, if you want to go into detail in that, on our YouTube channel, we've done a number of these in the past. It's called Over the Horizon. If you want to look at some of those YouTube recordings. Now, they're always a point in time recording, folks. Just remember that. What we're trying to do is give you some insights into what's happening in the market right here, right now. But, if that recording was 6 months ago, right here, right now has already gone. So please be mindful of that. But know that I'm teaching you how you can start to do that yourself. I also regularly run one-day events where I tend to go into that in super detail and show you how you can actually assess that for yourself. So keep an eye out for those, folks, and know that that's going to help you. Now, as I said, property indicators measure what's already happened. They got a massive lag. So it's auction clearance rates, it's the median house prices, it's the days on market. All those things have happened. What we want instead is a property driver. What is pushing the market forward? So there's largely 4 categories of things that move the market forward. And within those 4 categories, there's subcategories and there's 16 drivers in total. So go look at those particular things. So we're talking about government incentives and drivers. So where they're spending major infrastructure projects and that sort of thing. So government incentives with cash bonuses. We've got population growth, both interstate, births, deaths and marriages, intrastate, international migration, for example. We've got supply and demand, so development approvals, building approvals, finance approvals, and then we've got our purchasing power, which is things like interest rates, unemployment rates, and the fiscal policy with both APRA and the RBA. So understand that those things need to give you an insight as to, hey, is this market cooling off? Is it taking off? And what's going to happen next? All those sorts of things, okay? Now, the next thing we want to do, now that we're got our strategy and we know our area and we can tell that the market's actually doing what it is that we want to do, next thing we're going to do is start to build a team. Okay. Now, there are a ton of particular people that could be in your team. As a matter of fact, there are so many different consultants. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an indication on screen here. But the ones in bold are the ones that you really want as your core team. Okay. So town planner, architect, surveyor, civil engineer, your solicitor, and your accountant. Now, all of the rest of the people that are not in bold, they are people that will be subject to the individual deal themselves. They'll come and go based on the deal. But the 6 that I've got in bold, they're pretty much going to be part of your core team every single time. Now, what we want is a fantastic town planner who is excellent in your strategy and excellent in your area. We want an architect who understands the drivers and the kind of product that is created in your area based on the demographics of what is actually happening. Surveyor, we just want someone to be actually local. Now, the civil engineer, again, you quite often have utility providers that are different with different sets of rules across different jurisdictions. So you want to have a civil engineer who's, again, an expert in your area. Now, the solicitor and the accountant, they can typically be out of area, although you still want them to have state-based jurisdictions because there's always idiosyncrasies with that. So if those 6 people are part of your core team, they're going to be based on what is the development strategy that I'm doing and where is that development strategy that I'm doing. So as you start to become an area expert, you're going to see what consultants are actually working in those areas, start to assess them and see whether or not they are actually fit for purpose and doing all the things that you need them to do. Then the next thing you want to do is start to fill your deal funnel. Okay, so as you start to fill your deal funnel, you're going to get people from all sorts of places. You're going to be doing letterbox drops. You're going to be doing, door knocking. You're going to be talking to sales agents. You're going to do all sorts of things to fill stuff into your funnel. As you start to put things into your funnel, you're going to start to determine, is it developable? Is it profitable? Initiate negotiations. And then finally, hopefully at the bottom of that, you're actually then going to get yourself a deal. But if you're starting very early in the process, what I typically find is that on average, it takes about 300 into the top of the funnel to get your first deal out. And that's because when you're determining the development potential of a site, you're new and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to stuff it up and you're not going to get it right. Then you pass that is it developable phase and you go into the is it profitable phase. And again, you're going to learn, you're going to stuff it up, you're going to make mistakes. And so as you start to get down, you go, right, I think it's developable. I think it's profitable. I'm going to start to negotiate. And again, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to blow up negotiations until finally you actually learn from every single one of those lessons and you learn from the mistakes of your previous and you actually then lock in a deal. Now, as you get better and better and better and more practiced, it won't take you 300 for deal number 2. It won't, and you'll start to get more efficient, more effective because you're going to stick to the one strategy, remember. And by sticking to that one strategy, it's actually going to help you as you go. Now, then what you want to start to do as you're doing the site analysis, you're going to start to, as I said, you want to work out what is the development potential. So i.e., can it be done? And then what is the profit potential? And that is, should it be done? Now, every real estate agent on earth is going to tell you that A, it can be done, and B, it should be done. And chances are they're wrong. 90% of all development sites are not profitable. That is 90, which means that only 10% are. So the onus is on you to get really good at your craft to actually understand it, which means getting good at your feasibility. So now, the thing with the feasibility, most people think that it's this magic spreadsheet, okay? And the magic spreadsheet is going to give you the answer. Well, let me tell you, I've never seen a feasibility that has been handed to me by somebody who, wants my money to invest in it. Never have I seen one that was not profitable. They always give you ones that look profitable. But the challenge is, if they did not get good at their site assessment, then they didn't identify all of the issues and challenges on the project. And so they miss the problem, so it doesn't go into the feasibility, it doesn't go as a line item to be resolved. So you need to get really, 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 really good at your site assessment, and you only get really good at your site assessment by knowing exactly the strategy that you're doing, the exact rules that you're actually doing it within your jurisdiction. So all of these things are building on each other. Then you want to then go, what is the sales research of the raw product in the area? What is the sales research of the finished product in the area? And is the arbitrage between them actually worthwhile? Does that actually start to make sense? If you start to do that, that's where you're going to start to see whether or not deals actually start to happen. Then from a site assessment perspective, you want to start to get efficient and effective in the process. I see people taking days and weeks assessing deals before they then go to put an offer in, only to find that someone else has already gazumped them, okay? So I have a thing called the rapid elimination method, which looks at deals in a very different way to everybody else. That is, we look for a reason to throw it away rather than a reason to keep it. That means I can spend, the quicker I can make a decision, the quicker, and that one decision is, should I spend more time on it? The quicker I can make that decision, it's throw it away, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away, gonna spend some more time. Then I do a second round, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away, spend some more time. So I'm only spending quality time on the sites that are quality deals, okay? So that rapid elimination method has 3 different stages. Now remember, this is all based on the fact that you've got one development strategy, you've got one council, and you've got 3 suburbs. Now, if you can do that, then my rapid elimination method works really, really well. So stage 1 is a quick and dirty process, okay? Now that quick and dirty process is using a 10-minute check to determine, is it developable? Remember, folks, you are a development expert now, strategy expert, and you know the jurisdictional rules in that area. So you're going to know what are the deal killers in that particular spot. So we're looking for all the deal killers. And if there's no deal killers, then we're going to go on to that, is it profitable? So at this point, we're going to spend about 2 hours. Okay, this is a detailed analysis. We're looking at, is this profitable? Should I put in an offer or not? Should I do, I'm going to do a more detailed feasibility, identifying all of those different issues and challenges that we saw on there, and make sure that we speak to our consultants and say, hey, based on the challenge that I'm seeing here, what's a typical cost in order to solve that? Okay, so we're going to get more detailed with our feasibility, and we're only going to do it for the hot leads that actually make sense. Okay. Then lastly, we're going to do stage 3, which is due diligence. At this point, we're going to be under contract. We've been able to lock this thing away super fast, and we're going to engage with all our consultants to confirm all of our findings in the first stages. Now, for most of you, you're going to go, what the heck are you on, Rob? 2 hours and you want me to take this thing to contract? Remember, I'm a strategy expert, I'm a council expert, and I'm an area expert. So my ability to start to do this like this is nice and easy, folks. So if you don't do those things, then you're going to take much, much longer. And I see people taking days or weeks and actually do that. The next thing we want to do is then work out, well, how do I fund the deal? Okay, so funding the deal, well, there's a couple of things that I want you to start to consider. There's a thing called the rule of 3. There's 3 stages that you need money and 3 types of money in doing it. So there's deposit to actually purchase the property, there's serviceability to fund the debt, and there's liquid cash to run the deal. Now, you're going to need that at 3 stages. There's the point of acquisition, there's the point of constructing, I guess, what it is that's actually been approved, and then there's also the refinance of any finished product that we might intend to keep. And the last rule of 3 is, if you get to the point of doing commercial funding, then you're typically going to need 1/3 of the cost of the project as equity in the deal in order to get the funder to actually work there. So then the interesting part to that is, should I be doing residential or commercial funding? Now, we're all tempted with residential funding because it's deemed to be easy and it's much, much cheaper from an interest rate perspective, but it's actually one of the hardest things you can actually do, because they're assessing you based on you keeping a property for 30 years based on, can you fund that from a cash flow perspective for all of that time. So it can actually be quite challenging in order to do. Whereas a commercial funding model instead looks at the profitability of the deal, and they're less concerned about your serviceability and more concerned about, have you got the skills in order to do this, and is the deal actually a deal in itself? So how to fund the deal really comes down to, well, what's my current position? Do I have any cash or not? etc. Now, you might also want to start to look at alternative acquisition models. That is, how do I control the property rather than owning it? And I'm going to talk to that in a couple of secs. And then when I'm doing my commercial funding, there's a thing called the capital stack. And again, I've done a previous presentation on that. So go looking for that on our YouTube channel. Okay. Now, the capital stack is where in the hierarchy of funds is the cash that got a shortfall. Remember those 3 stages? So have you got serviceability? Have you got the deposit? Have you got the liquid cash to run it? So the higher up that stack you are, the closer that you have exposure to the actual risk that the deal will actually go south. And so that can greatly impact the amount of money that you actually are able to borrow, and B, the rate at which you can borrow it. Not going to go into the capital stack. Look for previous presentations on that, folks. Okay. Now, the next thing that we want to do is start to understand, are we actually deal ready? So there's a whole bunch of things that we want to do to actually get ourselves deal ready. So we want to prepare a list of all our assets and liabilities. Every funder on earth is going to want to know that. So you should do that very early in the process. You need to understand where you are. You want to minimize any of your liabilities wherever you can, any credit cards, any afterpay, any zip pays, all those sorts of things. Pay them down, pay them out, tear them up, whatever you need to do in order to get yourself by. Review your living expenses. Make sure that you're not spending frivolously on things unnecessarily. Make sure your balance sheet then starts to look good. Do your tax returns, okay? Almost every funder will ask for your current returns, so make sure they're actually up to date. And then determine what development entity structure, I should say, that you want to do your deals in. There's no point worrying about this right now when you haven't actually determined your development strategy, nor your deal size, nor are you going to keep it or nor exit it. Instead, you want to go, right, I know exactly what I'm doing here. I'm going to get into this size deal. I'm going to get into it with this kind of money partner. I'm going to exit the deal in this kind of way. That's going to help you massively in actually understanding that structure, okay? And then you want to go get pre-approval for any finance you've actually got sitting there. Make sure you've got either a mortgage broker or a development funder in your team, in your A team, as somebody that you need moving forward, okay? Now, the next thing you want to start to do is understand a thing called total development cost versus peak debt. Now, total development cost is, well, if I run my project from start to finish in one go and I construct absolutely everything, what will be the maximum cost, the total cost for that project? Whereas peak debt might be, hey, I might be able to get the project to a certain stage. I might be able to partially sell some of it or only construct some of it. And therefore, because I'm not funding the entire lot in one go, I might be able to have a slightly lower total peak debt, which might mean that, hey, I can actually live within my project. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So 2 secs while I actually bring this up. So if you have costs and time, typically what you're going to find is a project will have this sort of cost over time. So you're going to have a purchase cost, development approval, you're going to do things like your civils, you're going to construct 2 houses, and this is an example. So all the way up the top there, that is total development cost, okay? But if you don't have the funds for total development cost, means you can't afford to purchase, to construct 2 homes. What if you instead did this? What if you only had enough cash to get to there at peak debt? Well, at this point, you might be able to sell down one site as a raw block of land. That brings your costs all the way down. Then you could construct just 1 house and then stay under your peak debt. Now, there are many, many, many ways of actually doing that kind of scenario. Just know that it can be done. And because of that, when you understand what your circumstances are and the deal size you're actually getting into and what the exit strategy is going to be, then you can say, well, what's the flexibility I've got and actually starting to get out? You see, if we're trying to work that out before we've worked anything else out, it gets really, really messy, okay? Now, there's also, as I said, how to actually do our construction at acquisition stage. Sorry, I did touch on this before. So 3 stages of funding. So there's the acquisition stage. Typically, we want a 20% deposit and 80% debt. Then there's commercial construction. Typically, that's going to be a 30% equity. They changed the name of it at that point. And then the construction debt, and then any refinance of any residual stock. Now, they're the three stages of funding, but what tends to happen is when you get to construction stage, so when you're here, what they need to do is they need to pay out the acquisition stage. So these debts here get rolled over into this stage. And so what happens there is to go, well, that's what I've refinanced from my original acquisition lender. This is what I need for my construction loan. And this might be an equity shortfall that I've actually got in the process. So you want to start to understand that and make sure that you're thinking that through to go, have I funded myself all the way through to the end? Okay. Now, I'm not going to, you just saw a little flash up, no money down strategies. What if you don't have any money, right? So there is lots of different steps that you want to start to do in the process. So firstly, you want to understand, is it developable? Is it profitable? Then you want to do a self-assessment. How much equity have I got? How much serviceability have I got? How much liquidity have I got in my cash? How much experience, time? What are my limiting beliefs? All that sort of thing. Then I want to assess the deal itself. So how much time has the vendor got? How much money do they want in order to get the deal? What's the complexity of it? Then I'm going to understand what is the gap. And then lastly, I want to assess the vendor's needs. Now, if I can assess the vendor's needs, quite often they can give me some flexibility in the process. Now, flexibility in the process is then going to say, well, maybe they haven't purchased the next property yet. Maybe they need time to go find it, which might give you some flexibility to say, well, what if I purchase it later instead of purchasing it now? Those sorts of things. What happens if they don't want to move out of the area? What happens if they want to stay moving and living in the area? What if you built something for them? If you understand their needs, you might be able to do that for them. So they might be wanting to downsize, but all their friends and family have lived here. They want to stay in the area. What if you were building a duplex or a subdivision and you said, well, what if I just built something at the back for you? Or what if I built the one half of the duplex for you? Well, in that instance, you might not need to buy it off them at all. So you're starting to understand that, hey, if I understand the vendor's needs, I understand what the deal needs, I understand what my position is, where are the gaps, and can I plug the gap with one of those outcomes that I can actually achieve from the vendor through some very creative, negotiation skills. And when I start to understand that typically the vendor's needs, the challenges that they typically have, sometimes they need absolute certainty. Now, certainty might be, well, I can flexible on time, but I just need to know that you are absolutely categorically going to go ahead. So sometimes time is of the essence. Sometimes they need cash now, right? Sometimes time is not of the essence. Sometimes they need flexibility of time. So if that's the case, maybe they need the ability to know with certainty how much money they've got to spend, but they need the time in order to go buy the next place. Sometimes when they need cash now, they don't need all the cash. Sometimes they only need 50K, might be 100K. It might be a $2 million purchase, and for 100K cash now, you might buy the opportunity for time, for example. So when you understand those needs, that's going to help you. And the last need that you tend to find is that they want maximum cash. So in those instances, they're going to be a lot more flexible quite often if they've got time in their hands. If you can say, well, time is money, help me out there. So time is money, and sharing risk of the deal is also money. So they're the things that can actually do. So you want to start to then negotiate, understand what their requirements are, and then start to say, well, how do I actually negotiate that into that and structure the offer in such a way that it plugs the gaps with all your shortfalls, okay? Now, there are lots of different low and no money down strategies. I want to be super clear. Low and no money down does not mean no money is involved. Money is involved, but it doesn't always have to be your money. So there's 7 different ways that you can actually do this. So there's deal finding, project management, vendor finance, delayed settlement with early access, joint ventures, private loans, and options contracts. Now, I'm not going to go into all of those because every single one of them are topics in and of themselves, and I've done many of those topics previously. So just know that that's the case, and that you can go look those up. But the key thing is that what you want to do is you want to control the property rather than actually owning it. So if you can control the property, it means that in many instances, you can actually defer the cost to a later stage in the process. In some instances, you can avoid costs absolutely altogether. You can absolutely categorically improve the liquid cash flow required to run the deal. And it's going to give you creative opportunities to contribute the funds at different points in the process, okay? So sometimes it means that you can kick the can down the road. That gives you time to actually find investors to do the things that you need to do. It also might mean that you can actually add soft equity to the process through the development approval process, lift the value of the property up. That then helps you in order to get a commercial loan. So you might be able to skip the acquisition stage, for example, and go straight to the commercial stage because of the fact that that soft equity is enough to make that commercial lender actually happy. And it also can give you time to actually find the ultimate buyer in actually finding the deal. And some instances, and I won't say rare, but I guess not as many as if you bought outright, but in some instances, you can actually run the entire project and never actually own it, okay? So it can be done, folks, if you know what the vendor's needs are, if you know what the gaps are in the project, and if you know how to negotiate those 7 no money down strategies. It means that you can actually start to execute the deal, okay? Now, then at this stage, we've now got a property under contract. Now's the time where we need to worry about how do I get into the building stage and that sort of thing, okay? Now, the first things first is you can't just go and build. What you need is a building approval, or what they call in some states a construction certificate, okay? Now, the difference between a development approval and a building approval, the development approval says, look, these are lines on a page. We've approved that a dwelling is going to go in that spot. They're going to have these dimensions and these walls. That's great. And it's going to have this kind of look and feel. Whereas a building approval says, well, how deep are the foundations going to be? How thick is the slab? Is it going to be steel frame or is it going to be timber frame? What are the specifications of all the fixtures and fittings that are actually going to be inside the property? So it's the engineering level detail of actually how to actually construct it, and it needs to comply with what is called the National Construction Code. And there's a whole bunch of things that go in there, including 6-star energy ratings under the current legislation and soon to be 7-star energy ratings. It might change. Is it a north-facing property or a south-facing property based on just those sorts of things in order to get there? How do I actually get that extra star? Lots of things that go into it, okay? So know that you're going to have to get those engineering level drawings actually done. Now, typically, there's going to be either an engineer that actually does that or your architect that will actually help you to facilitate that. The other thing that you want to do is understand, well, what kind of product am I creating in the area? So am I building the right product for the right person? So have I actually looked at the demographics of the area? Do I understand, is it young upwardly mobiles who want low maintenance property and no backyard? Or is it going to be, I guess, someone who's got a small family and they do want a backyard? Perhaps it's some downsizers who want very, very low maintenance because they're I guess not home very often. They might be grey nomading or all sorts of things, okay? So different products going to be different type, which means different specifications that actually go into the build, okay? That's also going to start to determine, well, based on the product type you're creating, well, what kind of builder should you use? Should you use a project builder that does cookie cutter designs over and over and over and over, and they're very, very efficient and effective and cost effective in order to build? Or do I use a bespoke builder because I need some architecturally designed product because it's a very specific for this particular area? Then based on that, you're going to have, knowing what it is that you're building, where it is you're building, what the specifications are, you're going to be able to have a quantity surveyor actually then tell you what is the dollar per square meter of the construction of that particular property. Now, everyone right at the start wants to know what's the dollar cost per square meter, but we haven't solved all the problems first in order to determine what is the product we're creating, where is that product we're actually creating, because the labor market might be different, the cost of materials might be different in different areas. So quite often we're asking the wrong question at the wrong part of the process, okay? The other idiosyncrasy is that there's a difference in dollar per square meter, even for the same product type, just on the size of the property. So the smaller the home, the higher the dollar per square meter is, the larger the home, the cheaper. Now let's think about it. If it's a 3-bedroom home that's small versus a 3-bedroom home that's large, you still have to build the same number of bathrooms, still have to build the same number of kitchens, but the space in between might only be a small amount of timber to make that a slightly larger room. So very similar amount of effort to get there, but it's the materials that are largely the difference. And so that becomes a much cheaper when you're building slightly larger homes in order to get there. Then you've got your development approval processes and things like that that you need to go through, and also your building approval processes. I did touch on those before, okay. But lastly, we're then coming into, I guess, the actual construction phase itself. There's going to be many stages that actually go into that. So there's site prep, the foundations, the slab, the frame, the lockup, the fit out, the fixings, practical completion, minor defects, etc., etc. Okay. Now, they're the different stages. You need to understand how each one of those work. You need to understand, well, what am I checking for in all of them? But you don't need to know it today, folks. You need to know it much, much later in the process, okay? And then lastly, I guess if that's the end of it, you then need to know how to close your project out, how to do your sales, how to actually cash in and then do all your accounting and clean up and lessons learned, etc., in order to close out the process. So folks, that's kind of the big 12 that you guys have given me in the past. Okay, when I go back, let me go back and show you what all those different stages were again. And give me 2 secs while I actually find that for you. Sorry, I've got a whole bunch of notes that I've given to myself. Okay, so these are the 26. These are the 26 different key areas, and the ones in bold are your biggest challenges that you have told me. That's what you guys are doing. So all I did really is try to lay out a roadmap for you today to say, well, what order would I actually start to do that in? So for you folks, you need to go and reassess all of these different areas for yourself. You might have slightly different ones. I used those 12 biggest challenges as the example, but yours might be a completely different challenge. So work out where your strengths and weaknesses are, map it out, put it in the order that actually needs to be solved, and then solve one problem at a time, folks. If you can do that, you are going to progress your journey forward at a rapid rate of knots. If you would like to know more, folks, you can come to our meetups, and we teach all sorts of things, industry experts every single month in going to do that. So make sure you come to the meetups, learn, become an annual member, and you can actually look at all of those back catalogs of real deals and industry experts and that sort of thing. You're going to pick up a whole bunch of things along that line. And if you actually then want to further your education, we then also do have our Property Development Formula 12-month education and mentoring program. So know that those things are there if that is of interest at all. Now, that said, folks, it is Rugby League Grand Final day today, so I'm not going to go and get any questions this time around. Instead, I'm going to go and put my feet up in front of the telly and watch the game. So till then, folks, it has been a pleasure, and I will see you next time around. Bye for now.